This is Dr.RED Panda.
Power, desire, and control. Behind every empire stood a secret army, not of soldiers, but of women forced to serve the will of kings. They weren't lovers. They were prisoners of luxury, trapped in a golden cage. I'm Dr. Red Panda, and today we uncover the dark history of royal sex slaves and how power turned intimacy into a weapon. The empire's hidden prison. Every empire loves to celebrate its glory, the triumphs of its kings, the brilliance of its generals, and the monuments left behind for eternity. But beneath the gold and marble lies a silence more powerful than any army. The silence of the women who lived, suffered, and vanished behind palace walls. When people hear the word harem, they often imagine sensual luxury, soft music, silken robes, and women adored by a powerful ruler. But the truth is far darker. The harem wasn't a paradise of pleasure. It was a gilded prison, a political machine designed to control bodies, bloodlines, and desire itself. From ancient Mesopotamia to imperial China and the Ottoman Empire, the same story repeated under different names. Beautiful young women, often taken from conquered lands or gifted by nobles, were brought to serve the ruler's will. Some were raised to queens or mothers of future emperors. Most were forgotten, their names never recorded. Every look, every smile inside those walls could decide life or death. To catch the emperor's eye was both a blessing and a curse. Rivalry turned vicious. Jealousy brewed in silence. Poisoned food, secret alliances, and whispered betrayals were daily life. The harem was less a home and more a battlefield disguised with perfume. Eunuchs, mutilated men bound to serve, became both gatekeepers and spies. They carried messages, managed schedules, and sometimes even decided who would share the ruler's bed. Imagine a world where intimacy was bureaucracy and love an act of survival. And yet, for centuries, this system was accepted as natural. Society praised it as divine order. Artists painted it as romance. Even the women trapped inside learned to call it destiny. But the truth is simple. The harem was the empire's mirror, reflecting its most uncomfortable truth, that power has always hidden behind beauty and cruelty behind silk. The king's cage. A royal harem wasn't merely a display of wealth or luxury. It was a carefully constructed instrument of surveillance and control. Behind the silken drapes, the fragrance of perfumes, and the soft rustle of embroidered robes, a web of observation and obedience thrived. Thousands of women lived under the same roof, their lives bound not by choice but by the whims of power. Every corner of the palace, every corridor and chamber, was designed to watch, listen, and report. Words were dangerous, gestures even more so, and a single misstep could mean ruin. The king's desires were absolute. A glance could elevate a low-ranking concubine to prominence, while a slight misstep, a misplaced word, or even an unguarded smile could condemn a woman to obscurity or worse. Life within the harem was a careful negotiation of attention and favor. Women learned early that their survival depended not only on beauty or charm, but on intelligence, discretion, and the ability to read the subtleties of the court. Rumors circulated like wildfire, twisting intentions and friendships into threats. Alliances were forged in whispers and dismantled in silence. For in the harem, trust was as fragile as the silk robes that adorned the floors. Eunuchs, the guardians of the king's private quarters, became the eyes and ears of the palace. They carried messages, monitored behavior, and enforced the invisible rules of the harem. Their presence reminded every woman that she was never truly alone. Every smile, every sigh, every footstep could be reported. And yet, these eunuchs themselves were bound by fear and loyalty, often wielding their own subtle power within the hierarchy. Life in the king's cage was a constant test of composure. A woman's cleverness might save her sister, protect a friend, or even secure a political alliance for her family. But the stakes were always deadly. One whispered accusation could send someone from the soft luxury of silk sheets to the cold stone of the execution ground. Every favor, every glance, every touch of intimacy carried consequences far beyond the personal. It was a form of political currency, a tool of survival, and a measure of influence. The harem was, in essence, a kingdom within a kingdom, a realm where ambition, fear, and desire intersected. Luxury disguised oppression, and beauty disguised strategy. To the outside world, the harem might seem a haven of sensuality and indulgence, but inside its gilded walls, women navigated a maze of power, danger, and manipulation. Survival required mastering the unspoken laws, turning charm into leverage, and learning that in this gilded cage, even a sigh could carry the weight of life and death. Politics of the bed. Sex wasn't private, it was political. In the gilded corridors of power, the royal bedchamber was more than a place of intimacy. It was a theater where fortunes were won and lost, where loyalty was tested, and where ambitions were measured not in armies or gold, but in whispered promises and stolen touches. Every glance, every sigh, every carefully timed gesture could shift the balance of influence. No ruler, no matter how powerful, could ignore the subtle currents that flowed through their intimate quarters. Behind every knight in the royal chamber, alliances were formed and rivalries ignited. Courtiers and consorts watched each other with hawk-like scrutiny, aware that a misstep could lead to exile, disgrace, or even death. The political implications of desire were clear: who was favored by the monarch, who could sway the king or queen with a smile, and who could bend the court to their will under the cover of night. Gossip and intrigue were currency, traded in whispered conversations, stolen glances, and carefully orchestrated encounters. The bed became a throne, and pleasure became strategy. Women who lay beside kings and princes were not merely lovers. They were negotiators, spies, and sometimes assassins of reputation. A caress could secure a title for a brother, a touch could protect a mother, and a carefully feigned affection could shield an entire family from ruin. Men, too, played their roles with precision, understanding that their desires could be manipulated, that their attentions could be courted or diverted for advantage. In this world, intimacy was never simple. It was a weapon, a shield, a means of survival. For many women, survival meant submission or manipulation. Some learned to master the art of seeming acquiescence while secretly maneuvering the levers of power behind the scenes. Others wielded their beauty, wit, or cunning as armor, shaping the course of empires one whispered promise at a time. Every night held danger. The wrong word, the wrong gesture, or the wrong touch could ignite a scandal, end a life, or plunge a dynasty into chaos. Yet, for those who understood the rules, the bed was also a place of unparalleled opportunity, where skill and subtlety could achieve what armies could not. In these chambers, love rarely existed for its own sake. Desire was never just desire. It was a means of survival, a tool for ambition, a language spoken in sighs and glances. The boundaries between pleasure and politics blurred, and the stakes were nothing less than life, legacy, and power. The politics of the bed demanded mastery over the body, the mind, and the court, and those who succeeded could rise to heights unimaginable, while those who failed often disappeared into the shadows of history, remembered only in scandalous whispers. The silent rebellion. But some dared to fight back. Even in the gilded cages of the palace, where every step was watched and every word could be twisted into betrayal, certain women discovered ways to wield power without a throne. These women, concubines, consorts, and overlooked princesses, understood that silence could be louder than any command, that patience and cunning could rival armies. They learned to turn the constraints of their confinement into tools of influence, carving out agency where none seemed possible. A few concubines turned their beauty into power, subtly reshaping the fates of emperors and empires. Their influence was not flaunted. It was hidden in gestures, in whispered counsel, and in the networks they built in secret. They observed court intrigues with the precision of a strategist, noting alliances, jealousies, and vulnerabilities. A well-timed smile, a carefully placed favor, or a discreet warning could shift the balance of power. In some cases, these women became the de facto advisors of kings, guiding policy, appointments, and even military campaigns, all while the world assumed they were powerless ornaments of the palace. They wrote secret letters to allies and distant relatives, plotting behind the closed doors of the harem. They negotiated marriages, bribed officials, and even conspired with generals and ministers. Nur Jahan of the Mughal court, for instance, maneuvered herself into a position where her decisions were effectively law. Roxolana in the Ottoman Empire subtly manipulated the Sultan, protecting her family while shaping the empire's foreign policy. Even within the rigid hierarchies of the Qing court, women found ways to influence imperial succession, palace appointments, and the fates of rival consorts. Some went further, risking everything to challenge the structures that constrained them. Escapes were planned under the cover of night, alliances forged with foreign envoys, and coups orchestrated in whispers. These acts of rebellion were seldom public, for public defiance meant death, exile, or ruin. Yet in their silence, there was tremendous strength. The absence of overt confrontation allowed them to operate under the radar, manipulating events with precision and subtlety. Their silence was never weakness, it was a weapon. Behind closed doors, the seemingly powerless could decide the destinies of emperors, shift the course of wars, and protect the lives of countless innocents. They understood the paradox of power, that those who appeared quiet, submissive, or decorative often held the greatest influence. Their victories were rarely celebrated, and their names sometimes lost to history, but the empires they shaped bore witness to their cunning. In the end, the silent rebellion of these women proves that power is not only in crowns or swords. It resides in strategy, patience, and the courage to act when the world expects submission. In the shadows of the palace, they became architects of destiny, masters of survival, and quiet revolutionaries who changed the course of history. One whispered word, one hidden plan, one careful maneuver at a time. Echoes of the harem. Centuries have passed, but the system never truly died. The gilded cages of empires may have vanished. The whispering corridors of harems may now be ruins. Yet the lessons they left behind continue to echo. In every society, power is still often tied to appearance, obedience, and silence. The tools may have changed fashion, media, and social expectations, but the structures remain. Women and men alike are still navigating invisible hierarchies, learning when to speak, when to yield, and when to wield influence quietly. Modern society may claim freedom, but it often measures value in ways strikingly familiar to those ancient courts. Beauty is currency, influence is subtle, and silence is strategic. Social media feeds, office politics, and even family dynamics carry the same dynamics once hidden behind palace walls. The favor of the powerful can grant opportunities, the envy of peers can end careers, and whispered words can shape reputations. The echoes of the harem remind us that inequality, manipulation, and control are not relics. They are patterns that persist, waiting to be recognized and challenged. The story of royal sex slaves and consorts is not just history, it is a mirror. It reflects human nature, ambition, and the lengths people will go to survive, thrive, or dominate. It challenges us to question who holds power in our lives, who benefits from obedience, and who suffers in silence. The lessons of the past are warnings and inspirations. The women who survived, and even flourished, in the shadows teach us resilience, strategy, and the courage to act within constraints. Their stories are reminders that even in oppressive systems, agency can exist, though often hidden, and that the choice to act wisely, or to remain silent, can shape the course of one's destiny. So look around. How much of what we accept today mirrors those old palace games? Are we trading freedom for favor, authenticity for approval? The echoes of the harem are still with us, in subtle but powerful ways. And by reflecting on them, we gain insight into ourselves, into our societies, and into the invisible rules we live by every day. What do you see when you look into this mirror? How do you navigate the silences, the expectations, and the hidden power dynamics in your own life? Share your thoughts, your voice matters because understanding the past helps us shape a freer, more conscious future. And that's a wrap for this episode of the video. I'm Dr. Panda. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Until next time, take care.